Hello, I'm Tom Daly with the Knapp & Boat Manufacturing Company, Grand Rapids, Michigan. We're glad you're with us today. We're going to share with you some ideas and some suggestions on how to install the 8450FM ball bearing drawer slide, the one with the soft-close module in one end, and help you make it to be an easier, faster installation, one that's more accurate. We know that over the years you've probably installed thousands of drawer slides, hopefully many of them KV slides. The point we want you to realize is that when you incorporate a soft-close module into a standard ball bearing drawer slide, your tolerances become much more restricted, and therefore you have to be a little more careful as to how you install the slide. We have a couple of tips and tricks that we're going to lay out here for you in a moment. Why don't you go over and take a look and see what we're going to be using for our installation tools. Before we get started, let's show you some of the tools and some of the jig materials we're going to be using to do the 8450 drawer slide installation. First thing is an old carpenter's trick. We're going to be using 2 pieces of wood scrap. Now these are something perhaps not much larger than an old wooden yardstick would be. But they're pieces of molding, and we're going to show you how this is going to make our inside dimension measurement extremely accurate. The second thing we're going to be using is a piece of 1x4 rear nailer for the back of the cabinet. This is where the rear brackets are going to get attached to. You can use a piece of 1x3, but nothing any smaller than that, for the brackets will not attach to it. They'll be too large. You're going to have some tape measures. Either you're going to use a steel tape or a hard ruler. I prefer a hard ruler. The numbers are a little easier to read, and I can get a little more accurate reading on it. I'm going to be using 1 or 2 small C-clamps. These are going to be used for the wood strips. I'll show you in a moment how they work. Most of you at times have used a 18-inch or 24-inch level. This is okay, but when you get into a smaller cabinet, sometimes you don't have the room to do this. Therefore, my installations, I generally go with a 9-inch torpedo level or a small pocket level as well. These are very accurate, very simple to use, and they fit in just about any cabinet installation that you're going to be looking at. I use an electric drill, one that's charged, stays right with me. Of course, you're going to have a pair of KV8450FM drawer slides, and you're going to have a pair of rear brackets, and you're going to have screws. So with all what we have ready to go here, let me show you how we're going to get started. The cabinet we're going to be using today is a standard face frame cabinet, 1.5-inch face frames. The cabinet itself is about 10 years old. The consumer has asked us to replace their long-standing epoxy roller slides with a pair of 8450 soft-close ball bearing slides. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be removing the epoxy slides first, get rid of the rear brackets on the back, and then come in and we're going to be measuring the inside of this cabinet for installation of the 8450FMs. So what we're going to start with is we're going to take our 2 strips of molding. This is an old carpenter's trick to get an exact side-to-side distance. I'm going to lay the 2 scraps of wood inside the cabinet face frame, and I'm going to stretch them so that they're flush to the sides. I'm going to turn around, put my C-clamp on to hold them in place. Now that is side to side, it will not move either way. 2 things I want to do while I'm here. I want to draw a straight line on this side here, and I want to draw another straight line on this side over here. And what that is given me, that is now the distance between the edge of the cabinet side and the opening edge of the face frame on the right side, and from the cabinet side to the outside edge of the face frame on the left-hand side. These lines we're going to transpose to our rear nailer on the back of the cabinet, because that's where we're going to be locating our rear brackets. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my little fixture that I just made, I'm going to lay it on the top of my 1x3, 1x4, make sure that it's absolutely flush with the end, come over to this end here, and just make a quick mark. That's all I want to do. And then I'm going to come back with my carpenter's square and give myself a nice straight square line. That's the line that I'm going to be cutting on. So this is scrap, this is the inside dimension of my cabinet. Okay, what we've just done, we took our little jig fixture, laid it up on our piece of 1x4, cut it, Now we have a piece of nailer for the back of the cabinet that's the exact width of the back side of the cabinet. I told you earlier about these 2 marks on the little jig fixture. Well, that's where these are going to go right here. I'm going to do this upside down to show you, but I'm going to make 1 small mark there. I'm going to make another small mark right here, which are right on the line. Put my jig away, take back out my carpenter's rule, carpenter's square, right on the line, line 1, come down to the other side, square it up, line 2. Now this will tell us where the rear mounting brackets for the 8450 FM drawer slide will be attached. And the thing I want you to realize here is that some people will turn around and the idea is that they want to have, see camera guy, you can get in here nice and close, is that some people will try to set the bracket up so that it's just on the line. That's not right. You really want to have it so that the bracket is right on the line, so that this side, this surface edge here is right on the line. That allows the inside edge of the bracket to be perfectly aligned with the inside edge of your face frame. So what we have now is we've taken our rear nailer, cut it to length. We've taken our jig fixture and marked off where the side of the face frame recesses are, put it on here. We've attached our rear mounting brackets right on that line, so you can see where the line and the bracket are basically one and the same. We marked the center line of the rear nailer so that we're going to come back quickly and we're going to put an additional screw right in the center here, and that's going to allow us to put a torpedo level on here and make the rear nailer level in the back of the cabinet. One thing I want to point out is that some installation instructions, some processes that some of you fellow installers use, is that they'll cut this rear nailer to the exact width of the face frame, excuse me, the exact width of where the brackets should be. And what I find difficult to that is that if you've cut this material off, now you're guessing where the rear bracket nailer gets attached to the back of the cabinet. I find that if I have this thing the exact width of the cabinet interior, when I put it in there it gets held nice and snug, and I'm not guessing where the center line is because I've already marked it here. So the task now is how to fasten the nailer with the rear brackets to the back of the cabinet so that the rear brackets are going to be aligned properly and level with the front edge of the cabinet. To do that, we have to make an important measurement. Here again, I take my steel rule, go in the cabinet opening, and I measure it up against the bottom side, in this case it's granite, to the top of the rail, and it's exactly 6.5 inches. If you're doing a job that doesn't have a countertop, of course, you're going to have life a lot easier because you're going to be able to work from the top side down. But it's measuring from a constant point, usually the top of the cabinet frame, up in here to the top side of the cabinet rail, get that dimension. Now in this particular instance, because I do have a granite countertop on it and I can't get back there, you may find this to be a little humorous, but it's worked 1,000 times before. I cut a block of wood that's exactly 6.5 inches long, which if I were to set it up here, you'll see that it sits from the top of the cabinet right to the cabinet opening. I then use a handy dandy, one of the drawer rails that we took out. Usually it's a piece of wood that'll help make this a reach for me. So I can set this into the cabinet, go into the back edge, come back with my free hand, and I can make a mark on the back side of the cabinet, which is 6.5 inches down. The line itself doesn't have to be perfectly level. We'll level the rear bracket to the line. But just as long as I have a good reference point of where that particular distance is, whether it's 6.5 or 5 3/4 or 7 inches or whatever it may be, it doesn't matter. You're going to have a constant dimension from here to the back of the cabinet. Now why don't you come around and take a look and see where that line is on the back of the cabinet that we're going to be putting the rear bracket to. So way back there on the back side of the cabinet is the line that we drew at 6.5 inches down, and that's where we're going to be aligning the rear mounting brackets to. So what you're looking at now is the rear nailer has been attached to the back of the cabinet with a single screw in the center line. It's exactly the width of the back side of the cabinet, and I've taken a small pocket level or a torpedo level, put it on top of the board, and you can see where it's nice and level in there. Now we'll be putting 2 screws on either side of the center screw to lock that in place and keep it nice and level forever. Now we're going to get down to the point where it's going to become both interesting and fun for us. We're going to actually physically install the drawer slide into the cabinet and attach the drawer to the drawer slide. First thing we have to do is make sure that we have the properly sized drawer for the properly sized opening. This particular cabinet has an opening that's exactly 12 inches wide. The 8450FM slide, like most KV slides, require exact half-inch clearance. So when I come over here and I take a look at the drawer itself, and I lay my rule on the edge, you'll notice the drawer is exactly 11 inches wide. It's a perfect fit for us. Let's take a look at the 8450FM slide for a moment first. This is a 100-pound rated full extension slide, so when it opens up, it's quite a long slide. First thing we're going to look at is that this member here, this is your drawer member. This is what gets attached to the drawer. We'll be doing that in a moment. To take the drawer member out rather, we have a button here on the back side of the slide. Simply press that, pull, and the drawer member will disengage. Let's take a look at the balance of the slide itself. It consists of 4 remaining parts. You'll have your cabinet track itself, the main cabinet track. You have what's known as an intermediate member in here. This is the intermediate member that slides up and down. Then you have your ball bearing retainer. One thing that we've noticed, and we've heard from cabinet makers, that they said, gee whiz, this is different than a KV8450 slide that they're accustomed to. And what they'll try to do is that they'll try to push the slide flush when they go to install it. What they're not realizing is that in the back here, the new design of the 8450 has this collector arm built into the 8450 module. So when the slide comes back, you'll notice that it actually hits that collector at this point in time. So if you press and you force it, all you're going to do is break it. And that's not what you really want to do. The 8450 module itself, this is the trigger here. This is what gets triggered by the drawer member when it closes. So I'm going to flip this here and you'll see that it completely retracts back in. The 8450 uses a gear and the double gear system with a spring on the inside. So when it gets triggered, it's a controlled force. It doesn't jerk it all at one time when it's being closed out there. If you take the drawer member out, you're going to have the trigger in the loaded position. You can leave it there. I would kind of suggest you may want to think about triggering it for 2 reasons. Number 1, it's out of your way. Number 2 is that you can now push the slide completely flush to the front when you're putting it in. So you're not going to have that sitting out here about an inch, inch and a half for you that you're going to possibly get in its way. The ball bearing retainer, this is really important. We really recommend, sometimes when you take it out, the ball bearing retainer will sit here midway in the slide. We really recommend, it's in our specifications, that when you go to insert the drawer, you put your finger in and you pull the ball bearing retainer forward. The reason for that is fairly simple. If, let's just say, the ball bearing retainer sat here, and I'm going to put my drawer slide, my drawer member in. If I'm putting my drawer member in and it kind of gets cattywampus in there, it doesn't align properly, what's going to happen is that it's hitting here. And it's not hitting into the track on the ball bearings themselves. And if you press that too hard, you'll deform the metal and then the ball bearings fall out. So if you pull your retainer full forward, there's one and only one place for that drawer member to go into, and it slides perfectly into the ball bearing retainer. And then you can slide the slide back in, it comes back, and then it locks. The slide is once again fully reassembled, and you open it, and you close it, and the soft close mechanism takes over. So, we're almost done. We've now put the cabinet tracks in the cabinet, paying attention to be sure that the cabinet tracks are set back from the front edge of the face frame 3 millimeters or about 1/8 of an inch on both sides. If they're not set back the same point, the triggers are not going to engage at the same time, and you're not going to get good soft close mechanism action in there. I pulled the two cabinet members forward, I pulled the ball followers forward. I now take the drawer and I'm setting the drawer into the tracks on the right and the left hand side. It slides in, it pushes, it locks in and engages. I'm going to pull it back a couple of times. Job's done. Congratulations, you've just installed an 8450 FM drawer slide from KV. It worked first time, it's going to work every time. Thank you. Okay, the one thing I want to remind everyone is that the trigger, when you're going to put the drawer back into the cabinet, the trigger should be in the loaded position up here. Even though the intermediate member will hit here first, remember, the drawer and the slide pass by that to engage the trigger, and once it locks on, it'll pull the drawer closed. If you had it in the back position, in the unloaded position out there, now you're getting the drawer and the slide in the farthest back position to engage. It'll engage, but you're actually at the end of the line, so it may or may not click the first time. If you do it up here in the front, it'll catch it every time.